Hello again. Now, consumers are being pushed to supplement their salaries with unsecured borrowing, as take-home pay has been flat for the past 6 years. And this is worsened by the high inflation and rising borrowing charges. In general, social handouts are often the next greatest source of income for households, followed by salaries and then other sources, which may include borrowings. Let's discuss this further now with consumer expert Moeshfieka Botha. Ms. Botha, good afternoon. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for your time. It's tough times indeed. I mean, the story is that households, many South African households, are now using more than 60% of their monthly income to service debt.
Yes, and good afternoon. Thank you for having me. With the rising interest rates, more and more households are now obviously paying more and more on their debt. And that in itself is worrying, because you have households who are now paying about 65% of their take-home income onto debt. But on the other hand, you also have continuous rising costs due to increases in fuel, which then get carried over to increases in food. And because of that, consumers are now stuck with a double whammy. Consumers are having to pay more on their debt and having not only less to be spending, disposable income to be spending, but less to spend on higher prices. So consumers are really in a tough financial situation right now.
Yeah, and borrowing is not going to help, because it's the interest rates have just gone up. So the cost of credit is also high.
The cost of borrowing is very high, and what consumers have to realize that the levels of debt that we have right now is unsustainable. You need to have some sort of plan to get out of this debt. Continuous borrowing is not going to get you anywhere. However, I must say what we are finding is that consumers are borrowing so that they don't default, so that creditors don't take legal action. So consumers are in a very, very vicious cycle of debt right now. I would suggest, though, to consumers that they look at not borrowing, specifically unsecured loans from machinistas, from loan sharks who are not registered, because those interest rates can go sky high, and it's very, very difficult for consumers to get out of that sort of spiral of debt.
Yeah, and besides not incurring more debt, what other advice do you think consumers could benefit from?
Well, I would definitely say that consumers need to become proactive about their debt. If you are struggling with your debt, if you're struggling with your finances, or even if you think you're going to struggle, if you see something's not right here, make contact with your creditors, speak to your creditors. Most creditors are open and will assist you in making payment arrangements or even giving you a holiday break. In saying that, I do know that the confidence and the relationship between South African consumers and South African creditors is not very good. So in that regard, I would say contact a NCA registered debt counselor, and you could even look at something like debt review as set out by the National Credit Act. It's not something that works for everyone, but it is a debt relief option. I would also say, on a far more ground level note, is do the basics. Sit down with the family, speak to them, especially the children, say, you know what, this is the situation right now. We have to be cutting down on expenses. Then make that budget, as tedious as it may sound, as boring as it may sound. Right now, consumers need to make a list and know what their wants are, what their needs are, and cut as much as they can, because we are still looking at our interest rate hikes continuing.
Yeah, the hike cycle is not over yet. I saw a report the other day that says last year many more South Africans than previously had stopped going out all the time to restaurants, and they've cut down on entertainment. So it's time to make some sacrifices.
It is time to make some sacrifices. It is time to make some changes. It is time to get those priorities right. Because if you look at where we are now, our income is not at the level of the rising cost of living, and we simply cannot, a lot of consumers simply cannot keep up with the rising cost of repaying their debt. a bond, a 1.5 million rand home loan, for instance, in the last couple of months has risen by 3,400 rand on a 1.5 million rand home loan. I'm sure that sort of rate has not been experienced in the income, but it has been experienced specifically on debt and debt repayments. I need consumers really to be aware. Become proactive. Do not wait until your creditor takes legal action. Do not wait until your goods are repossessed. If you feel that you are struggling, do something. Become proactive. South Africans can no longer sit back or put our heads in the sand. We can no longer deny that we are in trouble.
Thank you very much, Moeshfieka Botha. She's, of course, a consumer expert as we're talking about the rising cost of living.